Elevate, the podcast series by Elevation Barn.
For all of our lives, Will, our stories were things that we passively consumed. We sat and we watched with our eyes and our ears, and we couldn't impact the narrative at all. What did we learn from that? We learned that we didn't have the power. And so when we go out into the real world, we act the same way. Now imagine, since childhood, every story you experienced, you were in with your family and your friends, and you could absolutely be the hero and affect the outcome. And like you could make a difference in those stories. Imagine how you're going to show up in your real life. You might just come out believing that you have the power to change the world. In the ideal world, you leave feeling a little bit more connected to others because of the power of that story. I think a great story definitely explores the human condition in a way that is relatable to people. I would just say to people to be out there and find the good stories and share them. And don't be scared to share your own. And I think the elevation of great storytelling is an important thing for us to do, because I do believe ultimately better stories will lead to a better future.
We all crave for more clarity of purpose in our lives, understanding how we can be more meaningful in the lives of others. But to be this, we need to understand ourselves first. Elevate helps us to reflect on our lives through the stories of our peers who have explored and discovered the hacks to elevate what's important and stand aside of what's not. In these episodes, we talk with leaders from all walks of life, sharing their stories so you can elevate yours. Please subscribe and join us, explore your wisdom from these stories with others, and join us in the barn to unite with new peers doing something of their own to elevate their importance. You'll be in great company. Today on Elevate, I'm joined by the fabulous and much-loved Charlie Melcher, an American creator, curator, and the thought leader at the intersection of storytelling and technology. He's best known as the founder and CEO of Melcher Media, a creative content studio that works with major brands, media companies, and authors to design books, digital experiences, immersive media, and storytelling platforms, collaborating with the likes of MTV, Microsoft, Netflix, Oprah Winfrey, and Kobe Bryant. Charlie is the founder of FOST, the Future of Storytelling, a live entertainment and content studio exploring how storytelling is evolving with technology. He's a much followed host of the Future of Storytelling podcast and the acclaimed author of The Future of Storytelling, How Immersive Experiences Are Transforming Our World. And finally, Charlie serves his and his community passion for adventure, leading and curating the FOST Explorers Club, a membership club that guides journeys and immersive trips around the world to experience cutting-edge storytelling, projects, and creative works firsthand. Charlie, welcome to Elevate.
Thank you, Will. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So they say that the importance of story often stems from how you lived your childhood. Tell us about how Charlie grew up and how his influence in story really blossomed into become a landmark icon in the creative industry.
Well, thank you. So I grew up in New York City, two very loving parents who were good storytellers themselves, though neither of them were in the creative fields. I also spent a lot of my time up in the country. My dad was born in Northwest Massachusetts, up in North Adams. And so I spent a lot of summers running around out in the woods and playing outdoors. So I was sort of lucky to have a little bit of city mouse, country mouse. I went to a wonderful school called the Ethical Culture Fieldston School. In fact, they taught ethics classes to us in kindergarten and first grade, and wonderful stories that would be told by the ethics teacher that at the end would pose a kind of moral question or challenge, but they wouldn't give us the answer. We'd have to go home that week and think about the story and talk about it with our parents and come back and share, our own take on what happened or what should happen. So I think a moral compass was tied to stories from a very early age. Another interesting thing about my childhood was that around the same time as I was enjoying ethics classes and those kinds of wonderful stories, we were learning to read in school, and I couldn't do it. They discovered that I was dyslexic, and I really struggled with learning to read and write. And I was lucky because it was identified early. So even though I was made fun of because I couldn't read out loud when we sat in a circle and read from our books, I didn't very quickly, I realized it wasn't because I was stupid or slow, but because I had this handicap of sorts of learning. And I spent years doing remedial reading classes and tutors and special ed. And I remember there's this wonderful woman, Mrs. Schultz, and we met in her office that was no bigger than a closet. And she would put this tray on my lap and pour sand in the tray and shake it out like a cookie tray. And then she would get me to say the letter B and show me a picture of a B. And I'd say B and B. And then she'd go D and D. And as I said these letters, I had to draw them in the tray of sand to sort of reinforce with all my senses how I was learning these letters. So that's what really helped me overcome that learning disability. And I always have thought about learning as a multisensorial, embodied experience because of that. I don't know. What else should I tell you?
No, it's amazing. And you went on to, which university did you go to in the end?
I ended up going to Yale University.
And that was to do film and literature, right? You went over there.
That's right. I ended up, at first I thought I would go and study international relations. That's what I was interested in when I applied to college. But the hot thing when I was there was the Yale School of Literary Criticism. And so I started to study with the groups, the teachers that were very prominent. And many of my friends were creative people, artists. They were in theater, they were poets, they were art painters. And I didn't feel very creative. I felt very insecure, in fact, because I didn't have a creative outlet. And that led me to decide photography would be my form of artistic expression. And I started taking pictures and taking all the classes. And I had this idea that I could think about photo books in the same way that the people in the literary department were deconstructing texts, were approaching literary texts. I was trying to approach photographic texts. So anyway, and I started a photography magazine, and that got me interested in design and printing and editing. So when I graduated, I decided I would go into publishing. And I remember looking around for jobs and getting an interview at Random House, and starting salary was like less than $14,000. And so I started my own publishing business. And I started to do materials for schools, print materials for schools, calendars, view books, brochures. Anyway, so I went off in a path of publishing as my career for many years.
What was the trigger? Because my daughter's dyslexic, and I think I'm dyslexic, if I could spell it. What was the trigger for you that allowed you to believe in the arts and that this could be a journey for you? Was it a person or a moment?
I don't think there was a particular moment. I think that the most interesting people I knew were the artists, the people who had creative forms of expression. And I remember thinking my parents were in business, and anybody could go into a business field and make money, but wouldn't it be more rewarding to do something that was creative, that touched other people, and to see if I could make a living in a space like that?
Yes, it's fascinating when you get that sort of door opening, and then suddenly you feel that you got your wings. Like I remember Salman Rushdie says that we need stories to understand ourselves, and you live this sort of rich life of storytelling in an incredible tapestry of New York City. What is it that you really appreciate about story and the impact it can have?
I really believe that stories are how we understand the world. Stories are what we pay attention to. We evolved as a species to to listen to stories because it's how we survived. You know, someone would tell a story about a lion in a cave and don't go there. And those who listened lived and passed on their genes, and those who didn't got eaten by the lion. And so I really think we evolved to care about stories, to listen to them. So I like to say they're the operating system of the human species. So, and it's not just about how to operate in the world, but they're so important in how we understand ourselves. We tell ourselves stories all the time, and they are how we think of ourselves. Is that narrative that from that inner voice that we share, and it's important to remember that. Like even our own personalities are kind of a character that we construct. There's some wonderful kinds of storytelling that I've learned about and gotten to do called LARPing, live action role playing games, where people will live inside a story world for, let's say, a weekend or less, and play a different character. You'll be given a character in this play, if you will, this real life story. And so you get permission. It's called alibi. You get the opportunity to play a different role and not have consequences. And you can, in doing that, discover new parts of your own character. There's a woman named Sarah Lynn Bauman who actually teaches this and studies this field. And she had an experience in a LARP when she was many years ago. And it was a LARP about the AIDS epidemic in New York City in the 80s. And over several days, you play different roles. And she's somebody who had a lot of anxiety and I think fear about death. And playing this other character, she came to a kind of peace. Like she was actually ready to sort of die in the game as this other character. Anyway, the point is, you learn about yourself through these games. You can learn new parts of your character, and then it helps you to realize that your character is kind of a construction that you make for yourself, or that is co-created with others about you.
Do you think story is really valued for how important it is these days? Do people really understand it? Like, when I was growing up and when we were going through careers, people would go, "Oh, you're such a great storyteller." And I was always wonder why other people didn't rely on it, because if you can tell your story, then it gives you the keys to your journey. But a lot of people, I don't know if it's appreciated, or I don't really understand why it's not. And you've had a career building the people's confidence in the power of story. Do you think people value it?
I do think people value it very much, but I think that they're shifting trends and fads. And so the main form of storytelling, maybe when we were growing up, was still based on the written word. I mean, it was still very powerful, that whether it was long form articles, newspapers, or books. I think these days, a lot of the stories that are told are quite short form. And they're sometimes, because of that, much more shallow. So I think there's been our attention tends to go to more short form stories these days, which is not entirely true. I mean, certainly we've all binged a series on TV and it's, 8 hours, 13 hours. So we have longer form also, but that short form is harder to tell a powerful and meaningful and profound story in.
Yeah. Like if you look at a movie from 40 years ago, it just seems to take forever. And then you see this snackable content now. Is it just the human brain has evolved its ability to capture story at speed, or we've just become overstimulated by story and therefore become impatient?
I definitely think our brain has accelerated its ability to process much more quickly. I agree with you. I watch some older films and I can't believe how slow they are.
So slow, right?
Yeah. And now we can tell a story at a much faster clip. But and we also just new media comes in and we adapt to the new tools, the new forms. There are all sorts of interesting things being invented now that are not that we have to get used to, that we have to adapt to. There was a time when I think it's apocryphal, but when people were in a movie theater and a train came on towards them on the screen and they ran out of the theater because they weren't comfortable with that kind of experience. And it took a little while for people to realize they were safe and the train wasn't going to hit them. That kind of thing exists all over the place. I mean, whenever a new form is invented, people have to evolve to be comfortable with it and appreciate it. And also, by the way, figure out how to use the medium correctly, how to tell stories that are powerful and impactful in that new media.
Take us into that, because when I discovered FOST and the event in New York, it was the go-to experience. Everyone would talk about this incredible melting pot of creative thinkers and doers in New York, which was one of the world's top hubs for storytelling, the arts, advertising, fashion, etc. And so you created this iconic venue where stories could melt into you and bring a new level of appreciation from the physical experience as well as everything that was going there. What was the trigger to create FOST? And what was your experience as the father watching its evolution?
Well, the impetus for creating it was my own evolution from telling stories in print. So for my first 15 years of my career, all of our storytelling was in book form. And then we created our first app. We had the honor of working with former Vice President Al Gore on his book, An Inconvenient Truth, which was tied to the documentary film release. And that was an amazing experience and an honor. And then we were working on the sequel, and I asked if we could have the digital rights, and he said yes. And then we went off and made our first app, which was for phone and tablet. It was called Our Choice. And that used the sensors in those devices to let you interact with the content in innovative ways. One of the most memorable parts was an illustration of a windmill that had a battery next to it and a house. And if you blew into the windmill, it spun, charged the battery, and turned on the lights in the house. Wow. And it felt like magic, but we were just using the microphone. So
amazing for the audio.
Yeah, for the audio, but it worked beautifully. Anyway, the point being, we got a lot of attention. The app became a top grossing app in the App Store. Steve Jobs loved it, and we won one of the awards for Best Designed Apps of the Year. And so in the course of the year, I went from somebody telling stories on dead trees to somebody who was had done an innovative digital storytelling. It was sort of heralded as the reinvention of the book. And that was a watershed moment for me, because I realized our skills were not about ink and paper and binding, but were really about storytelling and using each medium to do what it does best. So I walked into my staff and I said, we're no longer in the book business, we're in the storytelling business.
Wow. And
I also said, we need some new friends, because our colleagues in publishing were sort of all hiding under their desks, hoping this digital thing was going to blow over. The best way to find a new community was to create it. And so we started to look for the people who were excited by the opportunities, who were out there innovating and exploring, kind of creators and mavericks and technologists and storytellers and marketers and thought leaders. And so we gathered this multidisciplinary group, and then we found the most interesting new examples of storytelling, the most interesting new tools and technologies. And we got people into a safe and sort of open space where they could really share and be inspired and excited. And the goal was to get them to collaborate and cross-pollinate and to create together. So that's the origin story for the future of storytelling. And yes, it was very exciting to watch it grow. The first year it was a one-day event for 300 people. And by the time we had to stop because of COVID, it was a week's worth of programming for nearly 6,000 people.
Wow. And why didn't you bring it back after COVID? It was so iconic.
To be honest, it was killing us. Like, it was so much work.
In what way?
It was so much work, man. I can't tell you how, it was more than a normal conference. We made short films with every one of our speakers. So we were making 25 films. We had a full evenings program of variety show of wonderful storytellers and performers across media. We had a story arcade where the last year we had 100 exhibits and like 12
Ooh.
tents around an 83-acre campus. We worked with a troupe of actors and a writer and created a meta narrative that played through the whole event. So you're at a thought leadership gathering, and you were in an immersive theater experience with surprise and delight around every corner. I mean, there were just so many layers to this thing. And we had the half the week was the summit, which was by invitation and a higher price ticket. And the other half was the festival, which was open to the public and a much lower price ticket. So we were also, I mean, all those logistical things like Wi-Fi and toilets and, it was just overwhelming. So, and we had to raise all the sponsorship and all of the ticket sales. And anyway, so in the end, I think it was a bit of a godsend because I truly think I was killing myself and my staff to do this thing. So I'm sad that it's not happening anymore, but I think it had a great run, and we found other ways to keep a community together. I also do a podcast every other week with the kind of people who used to come and speak. The book, as I just mentioned, The Future of Storytelling, How Immersive Experiences Are Transforming the World.
Amazing.
And then we have this Explorers Club where we have our members come together and we do trips around the world and events. Anyway, so we keep the community in touch with our community.
Brilliant. I want to go into the Explorers Club in a moment. But something that triggered when you were just talking about how you create experiences, most event producers don't go to that depth. And it even stems from when you were, with the book with Al Gore and then the app. You have this insatiable appetite to dig deeper in the importance of the layers of story. Why? And where does that go to trigger the extra mile that you go? How far does that take the actual reader or listener or experience person? How do you unravel that?
Well, for us, we were trying to talk about and explore the future of storytelling. We felt that we needed to walk our talk. We couldn't just have people come and sit in a dark auditorium and be lectured down to. I mean, that's the past of storytelling. That goes back to Socrates and the oral tradition. The Romans and Greeks had that. We wanted to create an event where people were co-creating, where they were physically active, like it was a multisensorial experience. We wanted people being social with each other. Huge part of it was the community and the network and the relationships formed. We wanted you to learn by doing, not just by being lectured to. We know that people don't learn as well, sitting in a classroom with somebody lecturing to them, taking notes. They learn by experimenting and hands-on doing and embodied cognition. So we were trying to build a conference that would embody the ideas that we were exploring through the content. And that required doing a lot of things that you wouldn't normally do. I mean, our event started by you loading onto a private ferry boat in Lower Manhattan and being taken across the Sound on this adventure across the sea to an island where you got off, and then you were in this like Never Land. The island happened to be Staten Island, but it might as well have been Never Land because most people had never been to Staten Island who came to our conference. And we were on this beautiful 83-acre cultural center called Snug Harbor, which looks like an old New England college campus with beautiful trees and grass and old buildings. And so we had people outdoors. And what happened is instantly that New York City armor came down and people were like, look at each other and would talk to each other and be more relaxed. And we were very careful to make sure that no one showed up in high heels or a suit and tie, or like this was meant to be open, relaxed. Like what happened out here was sort of to stay out here. And the other beauty thing of this was that because we took you off the island of Manhattan, we had your attention. Wow, you didn't wander off for a business meeting or back to the office for a quick call or something. You came and you stayed, and you sort of turned your phone off and you were there with us. And that was something I had learned from other conferences, that sometimes you pay a lot and you travel a far way to go to this conference, And what you're really doing is you're buying the luxury of your own attention.
Mm. And do you find that you have more attention to detail because of your dyslexia, your passion for creativity? Because often with dyslexia comes like an OCD, like the attention to detail and the passion. Like being in your home, everything is so beautifully laid out and creative. And I'm like, after dinner, I went home to Jana. I'm like, why don't we get a house or why don't we get Charlie to come change our house? But that attention to detail, I think, but does that go back to dyslexia, you think?
There are certain things that I'm very good at. I have my super strengths and my weaknesses, as we all do. But attention to detail is one of my super strengths, and organization and spatial relations. And I think I'm also, again, I'm a person who's an embodied learner. So all of those things make sense to me. And certainly for years of being in the book business, if you put a typo in there, it's in there forever. There's no undoing it. So you learn that you need to pay attention to the details. And we all know, any of us who've done anything that's been really successful or been able to continue to bring people back to working with us, it is about sweating the details. It is about paying attention to the little things. People, that differentiates mediocre and from excellence. And people really appreciate it and get it. And sometimes it can be hard. I mean, I have this thing with my staff. When somebody new joins the company, I literally work with them to wrap a package. I feel like if you don't I ask you to send me a book to somebody, a potential client or a friend, like, let's sit down and figure out how to do this together. Because if you don't do it right and the thing shows up with the corner dinged or something broken, like, that first impression about our company is blech. Like, these people don't know what they're doing. And we want you to show up and spend, millions of dollars with us if we can't send you something without damaging it. Anyway, so attention to detail is very important. And we did pay tremendous attention to details at this event. And we tried to do something innovative. I think that's the other thing for me is as often as possible, I'm trying not just to repeat the easy thing, the known thing, the trodden path. Like, I love it when we can push into unknown territory, where we can try something that hasn't been done before, where we can be in a place that actually makes us uncomfortable. Like, it's even a little scary because we haven't done it before. And that's when I find that we get into the best flow. Like, when there's a little bit of terror and you don't exactly know what you're doing, all of a sudden your attention, your focus, everything is coming to bear to make sure that you don't, screw this thing up.
And is that the trigger? Was that the trigger for the Explorers Club? Because that adventure, you're taking people all around the world to see and be with these incredible people and these incredible moments. That was the natural extension?
I don't think that was the kind of terror that I was trying to recreate in the Explorers Club. No. I think that was more about, again, getting to experience these kinds of next generation stories that are embodied and multisensorial and immersive and social and responsive. You don't get that from just watching on a screen. You get that by being in the space and having the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, by your heartbeat picking up, and you can feel it racing. Like, there were things that we were excited about that we just couldn't really experience through a screen. That was the impetus for going and getting to do them together.
So unpack that a little bit. What happens? Where do we go? What is the Explorers Club, and how do people get involved?
So the Explorers Club has been a membership community. People sign up for the year, and then over the course of the year, we plan that we're going to go on a number of trips. It varies from year to year, from honestly 2 to 10, depending on the year. But then we organize a trip to this place. I mean, London. We were just in New Zealand. We've been to Amsterdam and Montreal and Edinburgh, Scotland, and all over the US. So we choose a place, but generally there's some sort of anchor experience that we're going for. And then we find the other cool things that we want to do while we're there. So when we went to Vegas, we went there for a sort of pre-opening tour of the Sphere. And that was like worth everyone going to Vegas for. But then we also found like 10 other awesome things for us to do. And our secret sauce is that we don't just do these things, but we get to meet the creators and have a session with them afterwards. And then as a group, we sort of process the things we're seeing and doing. And that's very fun because the group's so smart and interesting, and we get to spend real time together. I mean, where do you get to spend 3 days with people, have meals and be on buses between things and then go do really peak experiences and get to process it. So it's a pretty special group.
Does it change the people? Like you talked earlier about the lady that was creating the game where you act and you become somebody else. When you give people that space to truly celebrate a new experience and they can unpeel, do they change? Do you see them being a different person, the little boy or the little girl coming out?
Yeah, I think people let their hair down. I think people get excited and giddy. I think that people also in our group, they also they form lasting relationships. I mean, it becomes a bonding experience when you're in something exciting. You're in an escape room and you're relying on each other to get out, or you've just met somebody who's so inspired you and you leave feeling kind of in awe, and then you get to talk about it with other people. It's a really beautiful bonding experience. And in our world these days, it's very rare that you're part of a community that has that kind of regular cadence where you see people 3, 4, 5 times a year, and you have a special adventure with them. And that's not common.
It feels like you trigger the inner child, that you allow people to play again. Is that what makes a good story? The ability to allow people to celebrate true self?
I think a good story is one that relates to the human experience. It's something that is profoundly human. You can recognize yourself in the characters in some way or another. You take out of that some learning, whether it's about yourself or about the world, and you leave in the ideal world, you leave feeling a little bit more connected to others because of the power of that story. So yeah, I think a great story definitely explores the human condition and is in a way that is relatable to people.
Yuval Harari talks about how fact requires so much work to tell a story that you actually have to get all these details. You got to get all the depth. It can be checked. Whereas fiction is just free form and allows the imagination and the creativity. It's a lot easier to do. It feels like in where we are in the world at the moment, I don't know, or many of us get confused where fact and fiction is. And yet the most magnetic stories are fictional, and therefore we're leaning towards it. Where do you feel this is going, where the importance of information and what we've been drawn towards in the power of story?
Look, I've been aware for a long time that we are in a world that's more and more controlled by the storytellers. And that the unfortunate thing is that stories are a tool at the end of the day. Like any other tool, they can be used for good or for evil. And that's one of the problems, is that I think we've lost a moral compass, as there are enough storytellers who are telling the wrong kind of stories for the wrong reasons. But they are so powerful a tool. They override people's belief in fact or science or quantifiable information. So that's how you can have people truly believe, not able to agree on a set of facts because they believe in their stories, and their stories are not based in fact. So it is a time when we have to make sure that we have better storytellers, that we have a responsibility as storytellers. I mean, I've often advocated for almost a Hippocratic oath for storytellers, because if we're going to use the tools that we have, and by the way, it's just going to get even more powerful. I mean, the kinds of stories that are going to be unlocked with AI are going to be even more personal, and these embodied stories that I'm talking about are much more emotionally powerful. I mean, there's a whole bunch of science that supports that emotions originate in the body. It's not an intellectual thing. You don't say, "Oh, there's a bear. Oh, I should be scared. Run." No, you instead see a bear and you start to run, and then your body figures, your brain figures out that that's a terrifying experience, and you should. So, if emotions start in our bodies, and then we make sense of that sensory input by our brains, if storytellers can tell stories to the whole body, they have so much more opportunity to create more powerful stories. And there's also a lot of science behind the fact that embodied stories are much more memorable. We remember them longer because they're reinforced in more ways in our brain. Mm. So as we move into this age where we have more embodied stories and more personalized stories, which is another thing that's coming with AI, the ability to make it really like targeted on you and responsive to you, and even maybe aware of how you're feeling more than you're aware of how you're feeling. Like, just think it's going to be, if you think people spend too much time watching television or on social media now, just wait. It's going to be even worse. So anyway, with all of that, with these like super powerful tools as storytellers, it's a challenge. We need to make sure people act responsibly with those superhero powers.
Yeah, it's like, humans were the only animal to be able to tell a story. But now we have AI that can tell a story, and the stories that we get are the stories that we build on to determine where we're going. Now AI can build on itself to determine the stories that we're going. How is Charlie, because you're a very analog and passionate, and yet you'll leverage technology as a tool. How is Charlie in the realm of this AI revolution?
So look, I think it's a terrible mistake that AI companies made to start by scraping people's IP. Like it was a very bad way to make friends and get started. Right. Also possibly illegal, because I really do believe that artists should get paid and shouldn't be able to just steal their IP. That said, the AI tools that are here now, once we get the right checks and balances, and I believe, by the way, we could have micropayments, for people's content in AI that people could get paid, and that's what needs to happen. But the tools themselves are so powerful and so useful to help storytellers. I don't think the goal is to have AIs creating stories for AIs. I think the goal is to have AI helping human beings tell stories in ways that are less expensive, more personalized, more. Think about what's happening now. There's starting to be able to create little bits of film with AI without having the expense of shooting it, and you can prompt to create stories. There's a great democratization. The democratization of information and storytelling is continuing with AI, just as it has over centuries with all sorts of other technologies. And I think in general, more people being able to express themselves and tell their own stories is a good thing. So I am cautiously supportive of using AI as a tool to help you make your movie, write your book, not let it do it for you and just have it be regurgitated other people's work. But I do think AI is going to be really powerful and empowering, I think is the way to say it, for artists and creators.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Victor, he says that the AI is the great equalizer. That he's heavily handicapped, and he said just now that these systems and these different ways of engagement, it just allows us, say with dyslexia, or like my daughter, she's heavily trying to learn how to readjust so that she can conform to how math or English and things are relayed. Yet the technology out there is kind of bypassing that. Yet there are sort of basic principles that I think also stretch the brain in different ways. Going off those principles, can you share just as the viewer and also the creator of so many epic stories, and your book composition of the stories you've created and how you've delivered stories is incredible. Are there some basic principles of telling a good story and some simple guardrails and structure forms that people could follow to understand?
Well, the sort of classic is that there needs to be conflict and resolution. Like that's one of a historically famous elements of good story is it sort of builds to some, climactic moment and then gets resolved. And there's the classic hero's journey where somebody starts out on a journey, they meet conflict, they have to overcome their demons or beat the bad guy, and then they get sort of reborn and come back anew. That's the Joseph Campbell classic arc. Personally, I think that great stories are based around characters and story worlds. To be able to create a world and populate it with really interesting characters. That's another part of, and more in the kind of storytelling that I talk about in the book, which is immersive storytelling, these new kinds of stories. They're not necessarily linear narratives. They are worlds where people can enter in and co-create and come up with their own story or their own journey within that story world. And the secret there is to really be able to have such a rich world. The creator of the world is setting the rules. They're setting almost like the physics of the world, the engagement of the world. And with that and the rich details of the world, people can come in and learn how to operate in those rules and then create their own stories or find their own path in that place. So it's designing for possibility as opposed to setting out a linear narrative like with these beats. And it's really exciting. I mean, there's a wonderful mobile game that a gentleman who I'm friendly with, Genova Chen, from that game company created, and it's called Sky, Children of the Light. It's some years ago. But Genoa told me that if you, as a game designer, create certain conditions, that it really leads to different kinds of behavior. So in his game, there's incentive to gift things to other people in the game. And so, and the game's free. All the money that the game makes is through micropayments inside the game. And they did very well. They made a lot of money. But because of the rules of the world and the way they designed it, something like 25% of all the money spent in the world was to buy gifts for other people.
Wow.
As opposed to like arming up and becoming, a better, warrior or whatever, or just enriching yourself. And I was so inspired by speaking with him because it reminds you that the way we interact is very influenced by that environment and the physics of that environment. And those things were decisions that were made by people. Those are design decisions. When I'm sitting at my most, feeling the most despair about the polarization in our world, or what the crazy things that are happening, I'm reminded that there are rules that are created by people that are creating this kind of interaction now, and that people can change those design principles, and we could have a very, very different world. And that gives me hope. That gives me real excitement.
I feel that the kids are leading this way. Like, I don't know if it's just in Bali, but they are so much more into they have the device, yes, as a go-to accelerator for what they're wanting to achieve, but they really are in the moment, the gifting that happens between the kids. We can't go anywhere without Bella saying, I want to bring a gift back to X, Y, and Z. And, my background was, let's be frivolous with the spending and don't be whatever. But the actual gifting of love, caring, the hugging, the real human connection side seems to be there. Like even the people that run around our village, they don't sit in bars drinking. They're out being healthy. And do you see this new wave of reappreciation of humanity and the physical in the kids and how they're embracing story?
no question. I mean, there's a whole movement of, rejecting your phone that's out there now. There are a lot of people looking for ways to interact in real life, in the real world. I know that obviously COVID and all of that period was very detrimental. People were very forced to be alone and separated, and maybe some skills were a little rusty. But yes, I definitely see people out there, younger generation, looking for all sorts of ways to reconnect with others in a personal and physical way. And by the way, it's one of the things that I write about in the book, which is that all of these kinds of embodied stories are a way of playing together. It's a way, and it's not just for younger people, it's for any age. We're getting people out literally. Examples, escape rooms, they exploded in popularity before COVID. They took a real hit during COVID and now they're sort of coming back. But that's a situation, that's a relatively new form of social experience in gaming. It's fully alive. It's not analog. It's analog. It's not digital. And it's for small groups, 5 to 10 people at a time. And you literally can't succeed if you don't learn how to communicate, collaborate, team build. It's a play that is built around connection, skills of social connection, and super fun and wonderful. When they're done well, they're very exciting and beautifully done. It's not so much a purely puzzle solving these days. Some of them have more story and narrative. And anyway, that's an example of this kind of immersive storytelling, and where we're turning story into an action verb, like we're storying together. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's going to give us a lot of, it's one of those things that helps build back the desire or is a response to too much screen time. Robert Putnam in Bowling Alone, which is 25 years ago, identified this trend with television where people stopped being part of bowling leagues and church picnics and, all sorts of organizations because they were spending all this time watching TV alone. And that just accelerated with mobile and internet and mobile and got much worse. And so now we're looking for those ways to get people playing together again. I had on my podcast recently the CEO of an organization that's had a great growth called So Far Sound and Music. And they just do these pop-up live musical performances in surprising places. And you sign up for So Far, and then you go, and it's a little concert for 40 people in somebody's backyard, and this is the kind of thing people are so hungry for. And if we can rediscover the joy of storying together, as opposed to watching alone.
Yeah, you talk of companies like Meow Wolf in the book about places where you really have these immersive theatre educational experiences. Do you think, how do they keep relevant and reinventing? How do they, I often think we used to when we were younger, like Madame Tussauds was a kind of, that's a really immersive experience of nothing, very one-sided. But you get places like Meow Wolf where you're exploring these journeys and stuff. How much can the brain of this sort of stimulation expect and want versus the over-stimulation?
I think people's tolerance is quite high these days, and they're looking for more. But you also were asking the question of how it stays fresh. There's another company that's in the book called Phantom Peak, and it's in London.
Yeah.
It's an immersive experience that's more almost like it's meant to be a town, and they have a whole series of different adventures that they build in that you experience through things that are hidden in spaces. It's an elaborate little campus, through interactions with actors and through digital kiosks and computers and things. And they refresh their storylines every quarter. So you can go back and have a completely different story experience every 3 or 4 months and just go there and enjoy it. And it's a platform for storytelling now, or a location for storytelling.
Are you seeing an embrace it? Like I dive, living in Bali, I go diving every 2 weeks. And for me, it's I don't find a more interesting immersive experience. I don't know if I'm going to be coming across a manta shrimp or an eel, and it comes out of here, and then suddenly, and then you're like, what the hell is that? And you're capturing something that. Do you feel that people are reconnecting to the wow of nature as a balance against the wow of innovation and technology, or are people not really going that way? Do you think this could be a chance to re-inspire the importance and the celebration of it?
I'm certainly no expert in people going out into nature and whether they're doing that more or less now. Certainly in big cities, people are very disconnected from the natural world, unfortunately, and a lot of people live in big cities. And I do think that some of these story forms are inspired by nature, so they are trying to celebrate a human connection to nature. If you look at Team Lab, their work is beautiful. It's all over the world now. They come out of Japan, but their museum, they call it a museum, but it's really an interactive art, place is hugely popular. And all the work there is inspired by nature and trying to, emphasize the reconnection to nature. Anyway, I don't have an answer exactly to that, but I do think that these types of storytelling and games are moving into a more social space, which is a great thing. At least it's us connecting to each other, even if not fully, to the planet, because we are so alienated. A lot of our stories have separated us as opposed to bring us together. And I think that's a big shift. When you look at something also like ABBA Voyage or The Sphere, right? Here are examples of technology enabling. The ABBA Voyage is 3,000 people per show, and you're up there dancing and singing and having this wonderful time with 3,000 people, and you really feel like you're there with the band with ABBA, but you're not. It's a technological. It's CGI, computer generated imagery on an HD screen. But it's so good that you suspend disbelief and you're there having this wonderful dance concert party with these people. The same with The Sphere, except that's even bigger. If it's packed, it's like 18,000 people. So I think there's a lot of hunger for us to get back together and do things together, whether it's 6 people in an escape room or 3,000, at ABBA Voyage. And there's going to be more and more of that. And I'm hopeful. Here's another example. Competitive socializing, F&B, food and beverage, things like Putt Shack and Swingers and Flight Club and Formula One. And those things have grown like 350%. They're the hottest thing in retail and food and beverage. And that's because people are looking for something to do together and they're not going to the bars just to drink the way they used to. But let's go play mini golf, or let's go play darts, or let's go race cars, and now, sure, maybe we'll have a drink, we'll have something to eat, and we'll just have a great fun time playing together.
I love how you call it a new media renaissance, where we've got all these different things happening. It's exciting. So where you spend a lot of the time on the bleeding edge of understanding where story is important and how things are happening, and I presume you spend a lot of time with corporate leaders or political leaders, from Al Gore all the way through to the large corporations you've worked with, and you've worked with the biggest. Where do you feel the corporate world is in relation to this, knowing that they are facing, there's a lot of jobs being lost, a lot of people are moving around, it's like the snow globe has been shaped into where things are. Where, from the leadership point of view of the countries that you're in, do you feel minds are at? Do people, are they up to speed at the moment? Are they leveraging what you're doing? What's your take on it as a sort of intermediary between both worlds?
I don't think it's the greatest time in the corporate world, to be honest. I think that there's been a lot of there are these memes that sweep through management and senior, and one of them has been like, AI lets us replace lots of people. Like, we need to put all this energy and money into our AI strategy, and that's going to let us downsize. And I think that's a little bit overplayed. And a lot of people haven't really seen the returns on the AI yet. I'm not saying they won't over time or we won't get there. But yeah, I'm not seeing a ton of this work happening in the corporate level. There's some experimentation. I think one of the biggest challenges for companies is that a lot of the immersive and more innovative storytelling work that is embodied and alive is expensive and the throughput is small. So if you're using an old-fashioned metric like how many eyeballs per dollar, it doesn't make sense. It can be hard to justify. But if you can measure the intensity of the experience, I mean, there's somebody swiping through in TikTok and somebody having their mind blown in an hour immersive experience where they leave, talking about it for the rest of their lives. Those are not the same thing. And we're still working on getting the right metrics for companies to understand that the level of intensity of these experiences is worth the investment. But then the other thing that has to happen is we have to continue to find more economical ways to create that kind of emotionally powerful and resonant storytelling at scale. And it's one thing to do it in a punch-drunk immersive theater experience where you have a one-on-one with one actress or one actor. But that kind of intimacy is very hard to scale. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book is trying to get intimacy at scale.
Yeah, you talk about the importance of trust and to be able to do that. And I think a lot of us have lost trust in our peers, in our governments, in our planet, in our currencies. How do you think that wound is being healed, and how are you seeing people making a move towards that? Because you talk about how culture can't be engineered. So how can people bring it back, and how are corporations bringing it back?
I think trust has got to be built on the micro level. I mean, it happens in the communities. It happens between individuals. It happens when you get people talking to each other. I think we have to rebuild kind of from the ground up and, find those ways to get people doing things together. And then they realize that what bonds them is so much stronger than what separates them. But if you're only in a media bubble, you lose sight of that. So that's the reason, again, why I'd like to see people playing together instead of watching alone, because those experiences, when they're shared, when they're processed at the end, they become really powerful and meaningful. Just like our Explorers Club, that group of people leaves feeling a lot of trust with each other from shared experience. And we didn't talk about one of the things I just want to say about stories is that they have that ability to let you see through someone else's eyes, right? Like ultimately this idea that you can walk in somebody else's moccasins, like that comes from stories, from being able to see yourself in the eyes of that character. When we do this kind of immersive storytelling, it's literally you're walking in the role of another character. I mean, you're not having to recognize yourself in the character. You're literally embodying and playing somebody else. And that's a very powerful way to give empathy. There's an organization I think it's based in Hong Kong called Crossroads. And they do these simulations around important causes like immigrants or clean water. And they'll build basically an immersive theater experience. And they're so good and they're so moving for people. Davos has asked them to come for years to set them up so that the world's political leaders and CEOs can be put into a gameplay scenario where, in a few hours, they can learn more about what it's like to be ripped out of your country and forced to cross a border and go with nothing, more so than any white paper or lecture that they've ever received on the topic. So I do think there's opportunities here to create greater understanding for the other, as opposed to the kind of social media that we have now, or anti-social media that we have now, that does the opposite, which lets us dehumanize the other as opposed to connect to them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, you've experienced the elevation barn where, other people look at your life, and it's a stark reality check of exposure, but by seeing through the lens or fresh eyes, as they often say, it can reignite your self-belief again and rebalance that kind of work.
No question. It's a powerful thing that you organize at the Elevation Barn. It's very transformative. And by the way, I think of it as an immersive experience that you create. It is like you understand all of the elements of good immersive storytelling. And at the heart of it is that ability to co-create, to basically invest yourself into the story, which is exactly what happens at Elevation Barn. You literally, weave your own story in with everyone else's in a way, because we share and comment, and it's powerful.
Yeah. So I'd just love to lean on that culture thing, because, in Britain now, it's culture's measured as much as GDP for corporations, and there's an element of the importance of it. And you talk about it, that it's very hard to engineer. Where is culture in the corporate world through your eyes? And how can corporations try and engineer an environment that feels authentic in such speed of change?
I think everything comes from being true to yourself, right? From being authentic. I think the problem is that too many of them are trying to engineer it instead of tapping into what's true about who they are and where they come from. That's one of the pieces of advice I give when I deal with corporate clients is, let's actually understand your origin story. Just like you do in the Elevation Barn for individuals, it's the same thing. Like, what do you really stand for? Where do you come from? What are your origin stories? What do the people here care about? And then let's build a culture from that, or let's build our stories from that. Because really all we want to do is show you who we are. If you create something that's not based on who you are, it's not going to be believed. It's not going to work for very long. It's going to fail. So how be true to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And where do you see story by 2030? Where do you see the world that we're going to be in?
So there are some exciting things about that. I think that what's going to happen is that we're going to be able to be the heroes in our own adventures. We're going to have stories that are really responsive to us. I mean, instead of the scattershot, like, hey, I put this out there and I hope some people, like what I wrote and put on the television, or instead stories will be personalized. It's kind of like a merging of gaming and narrative, and being able to have stories that are really exciting to you, responsive. Like, maybe sometimes you don't feel like being overly stimulated and you want a very sort of slow and soothing story. Maybe sometimes you want to be in take the bad guys or take the hill or whatever, and you want an adventure. What if those stories and characters that you come to love can adapt with you into the stories that are even just your mood in that part of the day, let alone, who you are from your backstory. I mean, all of this information that's known about us, including, by the way, biometric information. I mean, think about how much the Apple Watch is recording every minute, and that kind of wearable is going to get more and more powerful. And so it might know when your heart rate elevates, when your galvanic skin response, your palms are a little sweaty, like it'll know you're excited or scared, or, so I think that there's the opportunity for some really powerful storytelling where you become the hero in these adventures, which means that there's also a real prioritizing of how you want to play. Are you somebody who wants to be more passive and watch? Do you want to be more active? I think we're going to be inspiring people to be better actors, to be better improvisational partners, to be better at singing and dancing and speaking. I think literally our stories are going to encourage a kind of creativity that most of us, for most of our lives, we're told we don't have. There's that wonderful story that I heard from someone else at a TED conference where he said, you walk into a class of first graders and you ask who can sing, all the hands come up. Who can draw? All the hands come up. Who can, dance? Everyone, and then you ask that same group by like 8th or 9th grade, and like one hand goes up because everybody else has learned they can't do those things. Well, our stories are going to encourage our creativity because we're going to need to show up for our friends and for the story to show that we're now able to be the leading man and the leading woman in this, or at least part of a group, a troupe. And it's going to be really fun. I mean, you go to an improv show, front row is great, but the best seat in the house is on the stage. It's to actually be able to do the improv and have that like excitement about responding and playing in real time. So I think that these stories are going to be incredibly powerful, personalized, responsive, embodied, and social. And because of all those things, they're going to actually enable us to connect with others. They're going to enable us to have some transformation, to learn about ourselves through those stories by playing those roles, by seeing through those other eyes. And here, I'll sort of end with this note. For all of our lives, Will, our stories were things that we passively consumed. We sat and we watched with our eyes and our ears, and we couldn't impact the narrative at all. What did we learn from that? We learned that we didn't have the power, that we were passive, that in fact, even impotent in the face of the stories. And so when we go out into the real world, we act the same way. Now imagine, since childhood, every story you experienced, you were in with your family and your friends, and you could absolutely be the hero and affect the outcome and save the girl or kill the bad guy or whatever. Like, you could make a difference in those stories. Imagine how you're going to show up in your real life. You might just come out believing that you have the power to change the world.
I love that. And it reflects off, I love your passion, how when you're talking about the future, it's like Charlie just turned up a gear. It's like the Ferrari dropped a gear and just left everyone behind, because you are such a passionate future of story. It is in your backbone. And I love that in you. And I think what's really important, like Dave Zabowski at Disney talks about the pendulum swing of emotion, that we should have down, depressive moments in the day or the week or the year, because that allows the pendulum to swing to those moments of euphoria and excitement. And often the higher the pendulum goes on one side, the more depressing things can seem, the higher it can go on the other. And at the moment, we're hearing a lot about the depression side. What you bring is the reality of watch out for the pendulum swing coming to the euphoria and the excitement on the other. And that's really, really exciting. So my final question is, you help elevate and lift so many hearts and minds in the work that you do. How can we, as an international network, you being part of Elevation Bar, how can we help Charlie in the work that he's doing? Because you gift and you support people nonstop. How can we support you?
Well, that's very generous to ask. Well, on a small scale, I hope everyone will consider getting a copy of the book, because I feel some obligation to my publisher who invested in it.
And it's a brilliant book. I've gone through that. I love it.
Thank you. It's also, there's that fun cover, right? So there are 12 covers, and you get to choose which cover you want to put. So it's personalized, it's interactive, it's tactile. But otherwise, I mean, I'm just very appreciative of your community, of being part of the community. I would just say to people to be out there and find the good stories and share them, and don't be scared to share your own. And I think the elevation of great storytelling is an important thing for us to do, because I do believe ultimately better stories will lead to a better future.
Awesome. On that note, Charlie Melcher, thank you so much for your time dialing in from San Francisco. I could spend hours just chatting through this stuff with you, and it's a bubble bath of appreciation as well as optimism, and we need that in the world. So thank you for FOST, and thank you for your team for all the great work that you do. Really appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Will, for all the great work you do. It means a lot, and you're doing that work that we were talking about, of building trust on a small, local level, and one small group at a time. So More power to you, my friend. Thank you.
Try and see where we go. Awesome. Excellent.
Thank you.